7. Jaden Napolitano. In July 2022, a disagreement between former romantic partners who were still frequently hooking up turned ugly when 22-year-old Jaden Napolitano went to her ex-boyfriend's apartment in Delray Beach, Florida to pick up a few of her belongings. According to a police report filed not long after, the pair had broken up 4 months earlier, but were still seeing each other casually. But things quickly went sour when the ex-boyfriend started dating another woman, and Napolitano was accused of slapping and punching him in the head during the property retrieval as he tried to block her. The report said that the young woman's ex defended herself by putting Napolitano into a tight bear hug. He ended up pinning her down to the ground, and when he finally let her go, she threw a stick of wood at him, hitting him in the arm. Napolitano was also accused of throwing more objects in her ex's truck, cracking the windshield. The situation only got more heated when the ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend showed up. She and Napolitano got into a verbal fight, which escalated into physical violence when Napolitano lunged at the woman and punched her square in the face. Authorities charged her with domestic battery, criminal mischief, and aggravated battery. The outcome of the case is still unclear, but jail records show that nobody by Napolitano's name is currently locked up in jail where she was booked or incarcerated in the state's prison system. 6. Kelly Gates. In early 2014, a 21-year-old woman from Florida named Kelly Gates was accused of hitting her ex-boyfriend with her car and leaving the scene. According to a report, Gates got into her pickup truck during a fight with her ex, 30-year-old Mark Kennedy. As Kennedy ran toward the truck, Gates allegedly drove right into him. Thankfully, nobody was seriously hurt, although Kennedy reportedly suffered a broken thumb and lacerations on his leg. The report said that Gates told police officers she didn't initially report the incident, since she doesn't talk on the phone while driving. But law enforcement didn't see this as a valid reason for not calling 911, noting that there were plenty of places Gates could have pulled over to make the call. The young woman denied the allegation, but was still booked into custody on suspicion of leaving the scene of an accident with injuries. Gates maintained her innocence and was cleared of any wrongdoing just a few weeks later, when prosecutors declined to pursue the case further. 5. Albert Pacheco. During the 1990s, a police officer from Hawaii named Albert Pacheco pulled a single mother named Kathleen over for a traffic violation in Waikiki. Sparks soon flew between the pair, and they eventually got married and had 4 kids together. Albert wanted Kathy to be a stay-at-home mum, but she instead became a realtor and did well for herself. As Kathy's success grew, so did her social life, and she also started working long hours to keep on with her career. As he felt himself losing control, Albert became increasingly controlling and paranoid. He constantly thought Kathy was having an affair and told her she was disrespecting the Bible by having a job. At some point, he even began following her around. Kathy tolerated Albert's abuse for years, but his behavior eventually became impossible to overlook. The final straw came in 2001, when Albert followed Kathy to a party at work and accused her of cheating on him with a co-worker. Fed up with the mistreatment, Kathy decided to move in with a friend. Albert continued to stalk her, but she was afraid to pursue a restraining order thanks to his status as a police officer. As 2002 approached, Kathy revealed her plans to separate from Albert. A few days into the new year, Albert followed his wife home as she drove home from work and rammed his car into hers, running her off the road. He then got out of his vehicle, approached Kathy with a fully loaded handgun, and mercilessly emptied the clip into her at point-blank range. Albert then reloaded the gun and fired every bullet at his 42-year-old wife. Authorities charged him with first-degree murder. Albert took a plea deal and admitted to a reduced second-degree murder charge and a weapon-related count in exchange for a reduced sentence of 20 years to life. In 2023, a judge extended Pacheco's minimum sentence by a minimum of 9 years. He'll become eligible for parole again in 2031. 4. Jeffrey Glander. Janine Radliff was working as a pharmacist in upstate New York when she met Jeffrey Glander during the 1980s. They hit it off and started dating and were married only 2 years later. Over the next few years, the couple had 2 kids and settled down in Lake Placid. For a while, it seemed like the family was living the dream. The Glanders were financially stable and looked like they had a loving and peaceful home life. They were doing so well at one point that Janine was even able to put her career on hold to devote herself to her family. But the spark between Janine and Jeff began to fizzle, and at some point it burned out entirely. They became estranged, and Janine moved into a nearby cottage while Jeff decided to live in the family home with his new girlfriend. In 1997, Janine's car was discovered submerged in a lake with her deceased body inside. Investigators initially thought she died in a tragic accident, but a closer look at her remains revealed injuries consistent with strangling and the use of a weapon. They also found it odd that Janine's body was in the passenger seat and that the car was put in neutral. Her death was later ruled a homicide. Detectives narrowed their sights on Nicholas Pecoraro, a handyman and friend of the Glanderses who was caught trying to leave town not long after Janine's murder. He eventually confessed to helping with the crime at the request of Jeff, who repeatedly offered him money and a car as payment before he caved. Nicholas said that he and Jeff waited for Janine to come home before attacking her. They then took her to the lake and drowned her. Both men were charged with the murder, and Nicholas agreed to testify against Jeff in exchange for leniency. According to prosecutors, Janine was pursuing a divorce against Jeff in the months leading up to her death. Her estranged husband didn't want to suffer the financial consequences, and he also wanted to cash in on Janine's life insurance policy. The couple's son later revealed that he overheard his father and Nicholas discussing the murder plot before it was enacted. Nicholas Pecoraro was eventually convicted of second-degree murder as an accomplice and sentenced to 20 years to life behind bars. Jeffrey Glander was found guilty of first-degree murder, burglary and conspiracy and was sentenced to life. He died in prison in 2019 at the ripe old age of 69. 3. Roger Harris. 20-year-old Donna Jordan worked as a live-in nanny in Hawaii during the late 1980s when she met 32-year-old Roger Harris, an airman with the U.S. Air Force. The pair quickly hit it off despite their 12-year age gap. Less than a year after meeting, they were married. 3 years later, they started their family. The Harrises moved a lot thanks to Roger's military job. In the meantime, Donna pursued her nursing degree. Just as her career started to take off, Roger retired, and the family decided to settle down in Florida. At first, Donna worked while Roger stayed at home with their 2 children. But Roger eventually grew restless with domestic life and returned to working. The couple hired a young woman named Jennifer Palmer to help care for the kids since they were both employed. In 1998, Palmer moved into the family's house as a live-in babysitter and began having an affair with Roger. After discovering this, Donna demanded that Jennifer leave. So the young woman moved out, but the affair continued in secret. Donna soon realized that it was never going to stop. Roger promised that he'd marry Jennifer one day, but feared he would lose access to his and Donna's children. A few months after the drama first erupted, Roger ruthlessly fired a homemade nail gun into the back of Donna's head. He then drove her body to a rest stop, abandoned the car with her still inside, and reported her missing the next day. Donna's remains were found 3 days later, and investigators were quick to zero in on Roger and his mistress as the prime suspects. Under pressure from investigators, Jennifer admitted that Roger killed Donna and that she picked him up at the rest stop. She also disposed of evidence for him. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and accessory and received a 20-year prison sentence. Roger was found guilty of first-degree murder and received the death sentence, which was later reduced to life in prison. 2. Bador Aliasari. In early February 2019, 911 dispatchers in Ingham County, Michigan, received a phone call from Bador Aliasari. She claimed that she'd gotten home from work and found her husband, Bador Aliasari, motionless on the floor. She said she called Amar's name out, but that she went outside because she feared someone was in the house. Responding deputies found a gruesome scene. Amar had been bludgeoned to death and was lying in a pool of both blood and bleach with a large amount of blood spatter on the walls. After ruling out robbery, investigators started noticing inconsistencies in Bador's story. They also sensed tension between the couple's family members, although they didn't understand the language the parties were using. Bador said she didn't know who would want to hurt her husband, a quiet, kind man with a heart of gold who was well liked. But she was unhappy with Amar, who she described as controlling. She claimed that he'd given her practically no freedom, that he expected her to be a housewife instead of a career woman, and that he failed to pay enough attention to her. Bador initially denied leaning on other men for comfort behind her husband's back, but eventually admitted to having an affair. In fact, she'd been cheating for years with a man named Jacob Fitcher. While she initially downplayed the seriousness of the relationship, detectives soon discovered that the pair had been making plans to move out of state together and get married. Prosecutors accused Bador of manipulating Fitcher into thinking Amar was abusive and ultimately persuading him to kill her husband. In the meantime, Amar was unaware of the affair, but it was no secret that his marriage was growing cold. Just a month before his death, he offered to get a divorce so that Bador could be free to live how she wanted. But for some reason, Bador felt it was necessary to kill Amar in cold blood. Fitcher pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, which holds a mandatory life sentence without parole in the state of Michigan. Bador later took her case to trial and was convicted of the same charge, receiving the same sentence. 1. Joanna Hayes. 25-year-old Heather Strube worked as a florist and was a single mum from Snellville, Georgia. After her marriage to the father of her child, Stephen Strube, failed in 2008, the couple became swept up in a messy divorce and custody battle. As the case dragged its heels through the court over the next year or so, the judge imposed a temporary arrangement that let both parents be involved in the child's life, leaving Heather and Stephen with no choice but to interact on a regular basis. One night in 2009, Heather drove to their usual meeting place, a local Target store, to exchange custody as dictated by their schedule. The interaction went quickly and painlessly, considering the contentious circumstances, and Stephen drove off just a few moments after the swap. He was already out of the parking lot when Heather was shot in the forehead at point-blank range. Police were quick to rule out robbery as a possible motive. With no other clear reason for the murder, they started suspecting that the killer was motivated by a grudge. Witnesses described the shooter as a short, thin, white man with black hair and a mustache, who wore khaki pants and a button-up shirt. The killer left the scene on foot, and police released a drawing to the public in hopes that someone could help identify the suspect. The first major break in the case came when a tipster said that they'd seen someone who resembled the suspect sitting in a white truck and taking photos in the area the day before the murder. Investigators traced the vehicle to Stephen Strube's mother and Heather's estranged mother-in-law, Joanna Hayes. Joanna initially denied any involvement, but she eventually admitted that she despised the young woman who was once part of her family, mainly because of the custody battle. While carrying out a search warrant on Joanna's car, police discovered gun residue and a wig fiber inside, leading them to suspect Joanna of executing Heather in cold blood while wearing a wig and fake mustache as a disguise. Stephen Strube allegedly admitted that his mum often carried a .38 caliber handgun. He recanted his statements while testifying in court during Joanna's murder trial though, and the gun was never located. Thankfully, other evidence, along with testimony from other family members, friends and witnesses, proved compelling enough for a jury to find Joanna guilty of malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. She was soon sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole.
Number 12. Christopher McGawan and Claire Inglas. In November 2021, a merciless killer battered and strangled 28-year-old single mother Claire Inglas to death at her apartment in the Scottish city of Stirling. The young woman's attacker jammed a baby wipe down her throat, and her body was covered in nearly 80 injuries when she was found, including burn marks from a lighter that had been pressed against her face and ear. Police were soon contacted by a taxi driver named David Addison, who had given a ride to Claire and her boyfriend the night before. Addison told investigators that Claire's boyfriend, 28-year-old Christopher McGawan, was noticeably drunk and that he was verbally abusing Claire in the cab. As the young woman exited the taxi near a friend's flat, McGawan allegedly demanded money for more alcohol and threatened to kill her. At the time, Addison assumed McGawan meant the words in jest, but when he learned about Claire's murder the next day, it no longer seemed that way. McGawan was reportedly known for his temper and degenerate lifestyle. At the time of Claire's death, he was on parole for a previous crime and had dozens of prior convictions. Claire's mother would later testify in court that her daughter and McGawan only dated for 3 months leading up to the murder. She said Claire's family and friends did everything in their power to keep the young woman away from McGawan after seeing what a waste of skin he was. They suspected him of preying on Claire because she was vulnerable and had a beautiful flat. When questioned by police, McGawan initially maintained his innocence. After being charged with murder and taken to trial, he admitted to killing Claire but argued that he had acted in self-defense. Thankfully, the jury didn't buy McGowan's pitiful sob story. After deliberating for just 2 hours, they found him guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 23 years. In a statement, the judge clarified that a minimum term does not dictate when an offender will be released, but that it simply marks the time when they can apply for parole. And while he admittedly could not predict the future decisions of the parole board, he also mentioned that it's common for serious offenders to serve significantly longer than the minimum portion of their sentence. One can only hope that McGawan is kept behind bars for as long as humanly possible, given the horrific nature of his crime and his proven track record for disrespecting the law. Number 11. Meggan Moss and Samuel Lachlan. After enduring years of alleged mental and physical abuse, Meggan Moss made the brave decision to leave her husband of 9 years, Samuel Lachlan, in 2019. She broke the news to Samuel when she got home from work one evening, telling him that she could no longer continue being in a relationship that she felt unhappy in. Lachlan couldn't accept that the marriage was over. He attacked Moss with a machete inside their Vancouver, Washington home, permanently disfiguring her face and leaving her blind in one eye. She's undergone multiple surgeries to repair some of her injuries, which included multiple broken facial bones and 3 partially amputated fingers. Samuel was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to 15 years in prison. The judge also issued a lifetime order of protection banning him from contacting Meggan, who said she'll let their kids decide if they want a relationship with their father when they become adults. In 2021, she publicly shared her story for the first time on TikTok to raise awareness about domestic violence. Her videos quickly went viral, with her growing audience of followers praising her for her strength and resilience. Melissa explained that she coped with the trauma of what had happened by using dark humor for a long time, but by the time she decided to come forward and talk more openly about her experience, she wasn't feeling as sad as she used to. She also said she had gained tremendous self-confidence from standing up to her abuser, but that she feels her ex deserves the punishment he received. Number 10. Andrew and Elizabeth Nikki Wilhoit. In early 2022, 41-year-old breast cancer survivor Elizabeth Nikki Wilhoit discovered that her husband of 12 years, 39-year-old Andrew Wilhoit, had cheated on her while she underwent chemotherapy. During a heated confrontation about the affair at their Lebanon, Indiana home, she allegedly charged at her husband, who later confessed to fatally striking Nikki in the face with a gallon-sized cement flower pot. When Nikki failed to show up for work, her concerned co-workers called the police and told them that she was having marital issues and had recently filed for divorce. During a visit to the home, sheriff's deputies discovered the missing woman's vehicle, phone, and purse at the residence. They also found blood in the master bedroom and bathroom. Andrew told police that he and Nikki had argued about his affair the night before. According to his version of events, Nikki slept on the couch and he hadn't seen her since. He suggested that something drug-related might have happened to his wife and said Nikki had recently withdrawn $3,000 from their joint bank account. Nikki's father confirmed that she had taken $3,000 out of the bank with plans to divorce Andrew, who he suspected of being involved in his daughter's disappearance. During a second interview with investigators, Andrew reportedly confessed to killing Nikki and admitted to throwing her body over a bridge and into a creek, saying he didn't know what to do. He said he was blindsided when Nikki filed for divorce because they had agreed to try making the marriage work. Andrew led police to Nikki's body and was charged with murder. He remains held without bond while awaiting trial, which is scheduled for early 2024. Number 9. Nazarene and Julian Knight. Julian Knight was arriving at his home in Lincolnshire, England after a medical appointment when his estranged wife, 37-year-old Nazarene Knight, demanded to know who he had spent the previous night with. She then charged at Julian and broke his glasses and rammed her vehicle into Julian's Land Rover. Nazarene also attacked Julian's mistress and her former friend Erica Hillier, who arrived at the residence during the assault on Julian. At some point throughout the ordeal, Julian tried leaving the home, but Nazarene allegedly threatened to follow him, tried ripping his phone out of his hand, and struck him in the head. She was arrested for her behavior and ordered to stay away from Julian and Erica. According to prosecutors, Julian met Erica during a difficult time in his marriage to Nazarene, who had already had at least one affair of her own. His health was ailing and Erica was hired as his medical chaperone, which naturally gave them the opportunity to grow close, while allegedly Nazarene embarked on a second affair and turned to alcohol to cope with her problems. 8 days after the first attack at Julian's residence, Nazarene showed up drunk at the property with a bottle of vodka in her hand and ordered Julian to drop the criminal charges he had pressed against her in connection with the previous incident. Armed with a 7-inch knife, she attacked Julian once again, then ran through the house yelling that she was going to kill Hillier, who had taken refuge under a staircase and was able to call the police. Nazarene was arrested again, and in early 2018 she admitted to several of the allegations against her and was sentenced to 15 months in prison for her crimes. She was also banned from contacting Julian for 5 years for any other reason than their children or their divorce. The judge sternly cautioned Nazarene that if she violated the order, she would face a 5-year prison term. Number 8. Robert Glenn Temple and Rosemary Christensen. Australian national Rosemary Christensen was in her early 40s when she moved to Florida in 1996. Her first marriage had ended in divorce, and she looked forward to seeing what the next chapter in her life would bring. She got back into the dating scene and quickly moved in with a man she met online named Robert Glenn Temple. The couple seemed happy at first, but there were signs that the relationship was toxic. In July of 1997, Rosemary received stitches to some facial cuts resulting from a domestic dispute. She declined to cooperate with prosecutors in a criminal case against Robert, and the couple got married 3 weeks later. Rosemary pursued a real estate career and was known among her colleagues for being reliable. When she failed to show up for work in August 1999, they became worried and contacted the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. Her car was parked outside her apartment, but Rosemary was nowhere to be found. Inside her home, investigators found torn-up carpet, a freshly painted wall, and blood spatter. They also learned that Rosemary's marriage to Robert was not doing well. Robert was having an affair with a 22-year-old woman named Leslie Stewart, and the pair had suspiciously skipped town to visit relatives in Illinois shortly after Rosemary vanished. Meanwhile, Rosemary had recently consulted a divorce lawyer and was talking to another man in South Carolina. Credit card statements led to the discovery that Robert and Leslie had purchased over $70 worth of cleaning supplies at a Walmart store the day after Rosemary was last seen alive. Robert told police that Rosemary had probably run off with another man, and he seemed strangely unconcerned with her whereabouts or for her well-being. He stopped cooperating with law enforcement, and for the next several years, he and Leslie bounced from one place to another across various states. Answers finally came in 2008 when Leslie contacted the police and admitted that she knew what had happened to Rosemary and where the woman's remains were located. Leslie claimed that she was afraid to come forward at an earlier point in time because Robert threatened to kill her. She told detectives that she had arrived at Robert and Rosemary's condo 9 years earlier to find Rosemary dead in a pool of blood. Robert allegedly told her he had accidentally killed Rosemary during a physical struggle after she came at him with a knife. At his urging, Leslie helped him clean the crime scene, and they buried Rosemary's body in a wooded area. Nearly a decade later, she led police to the burial site. An autopsy found that Rosemary had been stabbed to death. Robert was arrested for her murder in California and was extradited to Florida, where Leslie testified against him in exchange for immunity. The case finally went to trial 3 years later in 2011, and the jury found Robert guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole and died behind bars in December 2018. Number 7. John Wanda and Ashley Hehart. 29-year-old mother of two, Ashley Hehart, was just days away from moving out of the home she shared in Kansas City, Missouri, with her estranged husband, 31-year-old John Wanda, when she was strangled and stabbed to death in September 2023. The former couple were in the process of divorcing, but still lived together at the time, and they also worked for the same company. On the morning of Ashley's murder, John dropped their children off at her parents' house in a rush and left without having a conversation. About an hour and a half later, their employer noticed that neither of them had shown up for work and asked the police to conduct a welfare check. By then, Ashley's parents had also grown concerned and were on their way over to the house, where they found their daughter dead and covered in blood in her laundry room with a belt around her neck. According to an affidavit, the name Wanda was scrawled in blood on Ashley's leg, immediately bumping John to the top of the suspect list. A butcher knife and cleaver were found next to the young woman's body, and the laundry room door had been left ajar, but was secured with a bungee cord. The affidavit further states that John sent his sister a text message apologizing for the mess left behind at the house and stating, "It's way easier and much more satisfying than you can imagine." In a series of chilling Facebook messages he sent to a friend, John allegedly wrote that he had no doubt he would be caught that day. He mentioned that he felt no emotion and contemplated how to spend his last remaining hours of freedom as he prepared to flee the state, writing, "Part of me wants to get drunk and watch Shawshank Redemption one last time." John was picked up later that day in Valentine, Nebraska, roughly an 8-hour drive from Kansas City. He was reportedly on his way to Fargo when he was apprehended. The accused wife killer faces a first-degree murder charge along with 1 count of armed criminal action. As of September 2023, he was being held on a $1 million cash bond. Number 6. Cindy and David Rainey. A family vacation took a tragic turn in November 2021 when 52-year-old David Rainey was reported missing by his wife Cindy in Sewanee, Florida. Cindy reportedly told Dixie County deputies that her husband of 21 years had left their vacation home on foot the previous evening to cool off after an argument, leaving behind his phone, glasses, and wallet. His body was found lying face down in a canal behind the vacation rental's backyard later that night. It was immediately clear that David had been stabbed in the chest multiple times. An autopsy found no evidence of water in his lungs, ruling out the possibility that he had drowned. David's death was ruled a homicide, but the case quickly ground to a standstill and remained unsolved for the next 2 years. In late October 2023, Cindy and the couple's 2 sons, Bailey and Jack, were arrested for tampering with evidence. Court records list David Rainey's DNA and blood as the evidence that the trio was accused of tampering with. As of December 2023, all 3 suspects remained behind bars on a $250,000 bond each. Authorities did not reveal whether any of the 3 are suspected of being directly involved in David's murder, or if more charges are expected to come. According to the Daytona Beach News Journal, a wrongful death lawsuit that was filed in July of 2023 claims that Cindy was having an affair with her boss, Jeffrey Sawyer, who was vacationing with the family at the time of David's murder. According to the filing, David discovered the affair just hours before his death and got into a bloody altercation. The lawsuit accuses Cindy, Bailey, Jack, Jeffrey, and another guest of killing David, and names Bailey's girlfriend, Eleanor Coker, as the only person who tried to seek help for him before they dumped his body in the canal. Furthermore, the litigation alleges that Cindy Rainey mishandled David's remains by disposing of him in the canal and then having him cremated. In a counterclaim, Jeffrey Sawyer is accusing David Rainey of trying to kill him. His attorney, Patrick Brand, told the News Journal that Sawyer was the initial victim in the tragic event, which is why his client is counter-suing. Everyone else accused in the lawsuit denied the allegations, and their attorneys declined to comment to the media. According to Sawyer's version of events, David flew into a homicidal rage and attacked Sawyer, who was unarmed, with a knife. The counterclaim states that Sawyer suffered life-threatening injuries which required emergency surgery, but the filing does not contain any claims about who killed David. After the group left a vacation home, a cleaning person discovered a large amount of blood inside the residence and called the local sheriff's office. A responding investigator found what appeared to be an attempt to clean up blood, which is most likely what led to the evidence-tampering charges against Cindy, Bailey, and Jack. To anyone on the outside looking in, the case begs more questions than answers, and it seems like a lot of scandalous secrets are about to come pouring out. Only time will tell whether David's killer or killers will be brought to justice. Number 5. Dixie and Scott Shanahan. Scott Shanahan had a recorded history of mentally and physically abusing his wife, Dixie, including 2 convictions for domestic violence that he received during the late 1990s. According to court records, he had tied his wife up, slammed her head against a door, and punched her in the face throughout the marriage, and he was known for being a hothead in general. So it perhaps didn't seem like such a bad thing when the 40-year-old disappeared from the couple's home in Defiance, Iowa in August 2002. Dixie was 2 months pregnant with their 3rd child when Scott allegedly ran off to the city of Atlantic, which was about an hour's drive away. She gave birth 7 months later and began a new relationship with a man she later married named Jeffrey Duty. It seemed like Dixie had fully moved on, but at least one person found it odd that Scott had vanished, and that individual contacted law enforcement with their concerns during the summer of 2003. After failing to locate Scott in Atlantic, Shelby County Sheriff Gene Kavanaugh sent a deputy to Dixie's house. Dixie stood by her story, claiming that Scott had gotten angry at her for becoming pregnant with a baby he didn't want and refusing to end the pregnancy. She told law enforcement that Scott had left when she wasn't home and that he didn't take his vehicle. 3 months later, sheriff's deputies returned to the residence with a search warrant. Someone had noticed that one of the home's bedroom windows had been kept open the entire previous winter, and there were also signs that Dixie had depleted Scott's money, despite claiming that her sister was paying her bills. She had also sold Scott's tractor, telling the buyer that he would never be returning for it. During the search, investigators discovered that one of the bedroom doors had a towel stuffed underneath it and several items blocking it, along with several air fresheners placed near the door. As they entered the room, they noticed the unmistakable smell of death. Under the bed cover, the team found Scott's partially mummified body. It was covered in dead insects and had clearly been there since around the time he disappeared. He had been shot in the head while sleeping, and Dixie had a lot of explaining to do. She admitted to shooting Scott, claiming that she anticipated her next beating as soon as he woke up, and said she simply couldn't take any more abuse. By then, Scott had started beating her 3 or more times per week, and she wanted to protect her baby. Shooting a sleeping person does not constitute self-defense, even if a person anticipates being endangered by that person in the near future. But an overwhelming number of people believed Dixie's story and supported her throughout her trial for Scott's murder, believing she deserved leniency due to the circumstances surrounding her decision to pull the trigger. Community members even pooled together money to post her $150,000 bail so she could stay out of jail while awaiting trial. The jury convicted Dixie of second-degree murder, but made it clear that they did not think she deserved a harsh punishment. Unfortunately, under Iowa law, the crime carries a 50-year sentence with a 35-year minimum to be served behind bars. Dixie received an unexpected break in 2007 when then-Governor Tom Vilsack reduced her mandatory minimum sentence to 10 years. She was granted work release in 2018 and remains in custody with work release privileges as of 2023. Number 4. Helen Showalter and Gregory Showalter Sr. In August 2021, the body of 60-year-old Helen Showalter was found floating in the Des Moines River near Ottumwa, Iowa. She had been strangled to death, and investigators quickly turned their attention to her estranged husband, Gregory Showalter Sr., who the victim was in the middle of divorcing when she was killed. Family members told police that Gregory had arrived home by himself, claiming he and Helen had gotten into a fight and that he left her to walk home. Prosecutors, on the other hand, accused him of luring Helen to a work site and killing her. He then allegedly put Helen's body in his car, drove to the river, and discarded the remains. Gregory was charged with Helen's murder, but was allowed to bail out for just 10% of his $250,000 bond. He was released on an ankle monitor and faithfully attended court until the final day of his trial in September 2023, when the jury was scheduled to announce their verdict. In an apparent last-ditch effort to preserve his freedom, Gregory had cut off his ankle monitor, turned his phone off, and given his car away to a friend before leaving his home on foot. A police canine tracked the fugitive sent to a local motel, but the trail ended there. As law enforcement continued to search for Gregory, the jury announced their verdict in his absence: guilty of first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, domestic assault by strangulation, and willful injury resulting in serious injury. A first-degree murder conviction comes with an automatic sentence of life without parole in Iowa, which meant that all the authorities needed to do now was track Gregory down and toss him back in jail. Just 20 hours after he went on the run, the convicted wife killer was captured at his home, where he was found cowering behind a chair. According to court documents, officers announced their presence and informed Gregory that he did not have the right to hide from them. He reportedly refused to obey their repeated commands and was pulled out from behind the chair. Showalter was charged with interference with official acts, but he probably figured it was worth risking the consequences of going on the run, since the punishment is unlikely to change his sentence in any major ways. During the trial, the defense argued that Helen drowned and that a combination of factors contributed to her death, including alcohol, methamphetamine, and heart disease. It's probably safe to assume that the defense lost most, if not all, of their credibility when Gregory bailed on his final court hearing. Number 3. Aaron and Brienne Pennington. 30-year-old Brienne Pennington was found dead in her Gardner, Massachusetts home with a gunshot wound to the head in late October 2023. Her husband, 33-year-old Air Force veteran Aaron Pennington, was nowhere to be found, and the couple's 4 children had been left at home. A neighbor called 911 after the kids showed up at their house in a state of confusion over their father's absence and the tragedy that had occurred inside the residence. Investigators soon discovered that Aaron and Brienne were having serious marital problems at the time of Brienne's murder. The couple had met years earlier at a Mormon singles church group in their home state of California, but were now plagued by long-standing issues and seemed destined for a divorce. Nobody would ever guess by looking at their social media photos that they were unhappy, but a police report from shortly before the tragedy revealed that Brienne was planning to pack up the kids and move to Texas. She was also known to keep a gun nearby for her protection, although the weapon has not been found. And while it's unclear exactly what ripped this seemingly all-American family apart, all signs point toward Aaron having something to do with his wife's death. Surveillance footage showed Aaron leaving the home in his BMW shortly before the 911 call was placed. The car was found abandoned in a wooded area the next day by a hunter, but any sign of Aaron himself remained conspicuously absent from the scene. During a search of his phone, detectives found a chilling note from the night before Brienne's murder, detailing what appeared to be a step-by-step plan to kill his wife. It mentioned staying quiet, followed by, "If she wakes up, just say you're getting nasal spray." The note concluded with, "Get on side of bed, very close proximity to head, put hole in her head." Authorities obtained a warrant for Aaron's arrest for murder, but as of December 2023, he still hasn't been found. He has a history of mental health issues, but with no evidence to believe he's dead, law enforcement appears to be treating the case as if he's on the run. A search for the accused wife killer was suspended in early November, but investigators remain hopeful that a tipster will come forward and provide his location so he can be brought to justice. Pennington is considered armed and dangerous, and members of the public are strongly cautioned not to approach him if they think they see him. Number 2. Anmarie and Bill Stout. 50-year-old Bill Stout and his wife Anmarie lived in rural Darby, Montana with their 2 teenage sons. Upon returning home from a day-long shopping trip one day in 2007, Ann and one of the couple's sons discovered Bill dead in his bedroom. He was killed with his own gun, which he had reported stolen 10 days earlier. While searching the house, investigators found a firearm in his motorcycle saddlebag. Bill's hands were clean of gunshot residue, ruling out the possibility of a self-inflicted wound. There was also a rubber glove at the scene, which turned up traces of Anmarie's DNA, as well as a suspicious note in Anmarie's handwriting about how to use a gun. A search of her computer revealed that she had extensively researched different ways of killing someone, and the growing pile of evidence led to her arrest for Bill's murder several weeks after his death. In an unexpected twist, investigators discovered that Bill had been cheating on Anne with a woman named Barbara Miller. Anne had discovered the affair and Bill agreed to end it. He kept his word, but someone claiming to be Barbara soon started to harass the couple and their loved ones. It seemed like the so-called other woman didn't want to accept that the affair was over. Bill, his friends, and his family members had all received disturbing letters and emails, and at one point it seemed like the unwanted correspondence would never stop coming. A closer look at Anne's work computer revealed that she had been the one behind all the harassment, which she carried out from an email address she created impersonating Barbara, and her DNA was found on at least one of the physical letters that Barbara had supposedly sent to someone. The real Barbara had respected Bill's desire to end the affair, and Anne's claims of being stalked by her were a complete ruse. Furthermore, the timeline of events that Anne gave detectives didn't add up. She claimed that Bill had died sometime after she and their son had left the house for their shopping trip on the day they discovered his body. But the medical examiner who performed Bill's autopsy concluded that he had been murdered the night before, more than 16 hours earlier. Prosecutors charged Anne with Bill's murder and accused her of committing the crime as a way to end the marriage without losing out on her late husband's life insurance payout or the $500,000 worth of real estate that the couple owned together. Anne was found guilty of Bill's murder, despite her claims of innocence, and was sentenced to life in prison. Number 1. David Kinney and Brad McGarry. As an openly gay man from a conservative small town in Ohio, Brad McGarry dealt with his fair share of prejudice throughout his life. But he had a close-knit group of friends and family members who accepted him for who he was, and he was well liked at his workplace after leaving his career as a hairdresser for a higher-paying position in the coal mining industry. Sadly, the 43-year-old's life was cut short in 2017 when his best friend David Kinney found him dead in his basement in a pool of blood. He had been shot in the head. David and his wife Sherry had stopped by Brad's home in the town of Bel Air to say hi and had grown concerned enough to enter when he failed to answer the door. Earlier that evening, Brad had excused himself from a family dinner, saying he had to meet someone at his house. After ruling out the likelihood of a hate crime, investigators became focused on trying to figure out who the mystery visitor was. The Kinneys suggested looking into Brad's recent ex-boyfriend, who was quickly ruled out as a suspect. A major break came when a close friend of Brad's told investigators that he was having a secret affair with a fellow miner named DJ, which happened to be David Kinney's nickname. Nobody else in Brad's life knew about or suspected the relationship between Brad and his married best friend, including Sherry Kinney. Correspondence on David's phone confirmed that his relationship with Brad was romantic, and he admitted to it during questioning. Investigators began to suspect that David killed Brad to prevent him from telling Sherry about their affair. David denied killing his friend, but law enforcement's theory was supported by surveillance footage, which showed David coming and going from Brad's house alone before he showed up with Sherry later that evening. He eventually admitted that Brad had pressured him to leave Sherry and claimed that his friend had threatened to tell his wife about their secret tryst. David confessed to killing Brad, but insisted that he had done so in self-defense after Brad pulled a gun on him during a physical struggle. An autopsy found that Kinney had shot Brad twice in the back of the head, making it highly unlikely that he acted in self-defense. Investigators ultimately concluded that David killed Brad because he was terrified of the damage Brad could do to his marriage and life. Sherry was ruled out as a suspect based on her shocked and devastated reaction to learning about the affair, which came across as extremely genuine. In early 2018, David was convicted of aggravated murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number Number 8. Lisa Schuler. In May 2013, a 49-year-old Louisville, Kentucky man named Charles Pierce was shot dead at his married mistress's home in southern Indiana. 32-year-old Lisa Schuler initially claimed that Pierce was an intruder, but she didn't exactly have a good explanation for why his pants were down. She was also unable to hide the hundreds of text messages they'd exchanged before detectives got their hands on the victim's phone. After realizing that her initial story wasn't going to pan out, Schuler said that she killed Pierce during a kinky game they were playing because she was afraid he'd reveal their affair to her estranged husband. She further explained that she was worried that Pierce had photos from their previous encounter, and she suspected that he planned to show them to her unsuspecting hubby. So she solved the problem by pulling a handgun from her belt in the middle of performing a certain act. She then mercilessly emptied the clip into her illicit lover. It was carried out with a sense of chilling deliberateness, as if Schuler waited until Pierce was so distracted that he had absolutely no chance to defend himself from what was about to happen. Schuler ultimately pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to 45 years in prison. According to records, however, she could see freedom as early as 2034, after serving just 20 years behind bars. Number 7. Ryan Ravito. A 34-year-old California man named Ryan Ravito landed in hot water with the law in early 2023 when he was arrested on suspicion of possessing more than 900 illicit photos and videos that he captured using a hidden bathroom camera. His own wife reported him to the police after discovering the camera and confronting him. According to authorities, Ravito promised to destroy the camera, but this wasn't good enough for his wife, who was so disgusted by his alleged crimes that she saw no other option than to alert law enforcement. The plot thickened when news sources revealed that a previous wife had reported Ravito for a similar crime back in 2018. Sadly, though, this previous case got lost in the computer system due to a software glitch, and Ravito went uncharged until the more recent allegations against him came to light. While filing the current case into the computer system, police discovered the earlier accusations in a file that had never made it to its proper destination after being rerouted by the software. But now that the second round of allegations have been brought forth and the first case has been rediscovered, Ravito is facing felony charges. He's maintained his innocence through his lawyer, who told NBC reporters that he prefers to fight the case through the legal system rather than the media. But otherwise, he's declined to comment on the cases. Number 6. Tiffany Camp. In a sickening act of alleged cruelty that happened in early 2022, a 33-year-old woman from Dinwiddie County, Virginia, named Tiffany Camp was accused of burying a dog alive. The allegations came to light when someone at the trailer park where Camp lived claimed to witness the act firsthand. Police reported to the property, where they found the pit bull mix, Lily, buried in a garbage bag. She was clinging to life and was expected to survive, but she faced a long road to recovery. According to an update from about a month after her rescue, Lily had made considerable progress. She was putting on weight and had undergone surgery to repair some internal damage, but she was still under close medical care due to ongoing problems with her back legs. Camp was charged with felony animal cruelty and was held without bond while she awaited her next court date. The outcome of the case is unclear, but Virginia prison records show that nobody by Camp's name is currently incarcerated in the state. Number 5. Sha Spink. When Sarah Pitcher realized that her toxic marriage to Sha Spink wasn't going to work out, she divorced him and moved from Indiana to Phoenix for a fresh start. She thought the worst was over, but she was unaware of just how unwilling Sean was to let go of their relationship. Unbeknownst to Sarah, her ex had followed her to Phoenix and made a habit of stalking her outside her house with binoculars. And when neighbors noticed Sean had expressed their concerns to Sarah, she merely assumed he was an innocent stranger bird-watching in the neighborhood. But she learned the harsh truth one day in September 2018, when Sean viciously attacked her as she stepped outside with her dog. He sprayed Sarah in the face with Raid, forced her back into the house, zip-tied her wrists, and brutally assaulted her. And in what would later turn out to be a bizarre murder plot, Sean tried to suffocate his ex-wife to death with a garbage bag. Then he stabbed her in the face with a knife while telling her that he was going to kill her and then drive off a cliff. Sarah later told local station KPNX that she still remembered the crunching sound of the blade puncturing her skull. She spent 3.5 hours fighting for her life, at times fearing that she was going to run out of strength. Then, when trying to physically fight off her ex didn't work, she attempted to convince Sean that they should go for ice cream one last time, like they used to do as a couple. And it worked. When Sarah saw people in the parking lot outside the restaurant, she fled from the vehicle and ran toward them, screaming for help. She was left blinded in one eye by the attack. Sean sped away, but it was only a matter of time before he would face justice. He's currently serving a sentence of 25 years to life for attempted murder, aggravated assault, kidnapping, and other charges. Sarah can rest easy for now, but Sean has allegedly continued to threaten her from behind bars. She plans to fight to keep him in prison when he becomes eligible for parole in 2047. Number 4. Russell Tillis. A Florida woman named Terry Patzer thought she'd found the man of her dreams when she met Russell Tillis in the late 1980s. At first she was thrilled by how attractive and noticed Tillis made her feel, but it wasn't long before his flattering gestures gave way to controlling and abusive behavior. Terry nevertheless gave Tillis the benefit of the doubt and pursued a future with him, hoping that he'd eventually go back to being her knight in shining armor. She later told the ID channel series Evil Lives Here that the relationship only worsened as Tillis became increasingly possessive and cut her off from her family and friends. Terry tried unsuccessfully to leave Tillis at least once, but by then she'd started a family with him, which understandably made it difficult to get away. At times she felt more like her husband's hostage than an actual wife, and at one point Tillis threatened to hunt Terry down if she ever left him. During those hellish years, Tillis repeatedly got arrested for attacking, abducting, and doing horrific things to other women. He often claimed that he was being falsely accused, and the consequences weren't overly harsh, even though he was in and out of prison, so Terry found reasons to believe him. But she eventually became suspicious that Tillis was actually doing the things he was constantly being accused of. After 9 years of marriage, Terry finally made a clean break. She moved into her own place, divorced Tillis, and did her best to keep herself and her children safe. And while she knew what an awful person her ex-husband was, she was nevertheless shocked when Tillis was charged with murder in 2016. He was accused of kidnapping 30-year-old Joni Lynn Gunter, killing her and dismembering her body, and Tillis was charged with the crime after her remains were found in his backyard. Terry was lucky she escaped Tillis, whose mobile home was likened to a torture chamber. Had she not left when she did, the marriage may have ended in her death. And while the true extent of Tillis's crimes may never be known, Gunter's murder put an end to his campaign of terror against innocent women. In the end, he was found guilty on all charges and was sentenced to 2 life terms. Number 3. Mark O'Leary. When a woman in Linwood, Washington accused Mark O'Leary of attacking her in 2008, law enforcement allegedly pressured her to recant her statement, and they even charged her with false reporting. But the attack really happened, and at least one other woman had come forward with similar allegations against O'Leary. Maybe O'Leary would have been stopped if his previous victims' accusations had been taken seriously, but he remained free, and in 2009 he moved to Colorado, where he stalked and attacked at least 4 more women over the next 2 years. His MO involved entering victims' homes, wearing a mask, binding them, and mercilessly assaulting them. A pair of determined female detectives from 2 different police agencies worked together after noticing similar crimes happening in their respective jurisdictions. A specialized task force finally caught O'Leary in early 2011, thanks to the building evidence, including a woman who remembered a distinctive tattoo on the attacker's leg. There was also surveillance footage of his truck at one of the crime scenes, and a memory card containing over 100 photos that O'Leary took during one of his assaults. The chronic attacker was hit with 39 criminal charges, such as stalking, kidnapping, and assault. He initially denied his guilt, but eventually admitted in court, in his own words, "I am a violent predator and I am out of control." O'Leary pleaded guilty to 28 counts and was sentenced to 327.5 years in prison. He agreed that he deserves to spend the rest of his life behind bars, and that's exactly what he's doing. The Netflix miniseries Unbelievable was based on O'Leary's case and, more specifically, on the systemic failures that led to a lack of justice for his first victim, which enabled him to continue committing horrific crimes against multiple other women. Number 2. John Long and Jessica Offenburger. In a disturbing case of incest that began in November 2019, a 51-year-old Greenbrier County, West Virginia man named John Long and his adult daughter, 29-year-old Jessica Offenburger, had a steamy affair that breached moral boundaries that most people would never even consider crossing. Someone tipped the police off to the illicit relationship in 2022, and Offenburger allegedly admitted to having nearly 90 intimate encounters with Long. According to law enforcement, the young woman claimed that she indulged in the relationship in exchange for drug money. She also reportedly said that most of the meetings happened in a camper on Long's property and along back roads. Offenburger acknowledged an awareness that Long was her biological father and said that the intimacy was consensual. During questioning, Long gave the same version of events and admitted that he knew he was being intimate with his biological daughter. Both parties were each charged with 68 counts of incest. And according to an update from August 2023, Long was sentenced to 10 to 30 years in prison. Then, after his release, he'll serve 5 to 15 years of house arrest. He'll also be on probation for 25 years. Unfortunately, though, the status of Offenburger's case is unclear. Number 1. Charlie Smith. Over a 5-month period in 2012, a former mechanic from Accomack County, Virginia, named Charles R. Smith III, committed dozens of arsons because of an intimacy problem with his girlfriend, Tonya Bundick. According to a videotaped confession, Smith and Bundick experienced problems in their relationship because of Smith's inability to perform in the bedroom. Or in other words, Smith allegedly committed the crimes out of his intimacy-related frustrations, which only added to the other problems the couple were experiencing at the time, including poverty and addiction. At their worst point, the pair were eating out of dumpsters. Smith initially refused to implicate Bundick as an accomplice to his crimes, but he'd later claim that it all started when Bundick told him to burn a building down. And so began a pattern of ending the night with some matches and old rags. It wasn't long after that before Smith became convinced that he had to continue committing arsons in order to keep her happy and to make up for his intimacy issues. The fires perplexed investigators, who spent countless hours trying to find evidence or some sort of pattern that would lead them to the culprits. They even staked themselves out near abandoned buildings, hoping to catch the perpetrators in the act. But the fires continued as the suspects somehow went unnoticed. At the height of Smith's crime spree, an arson was happening almost every night, and firefighters were sleeping in the station because they were so busy. Despite Smith's eventual decision to point the finger at Bundick as the inspiration for the fires, she was only ever connected to one arson. Smith refused to testify against his girlfriend until he found out that she was seeing another man, at which point he apparently became more willing to incriminate Bundick. Tonya Bundick took an Alford plea, which meant that she maintained her innocence but admitted that prosecutors had a strong enough argument and ample evidence to secure a conviction against her, and as a result she was sentenced to 17 years in prison and is due to be released in September 2025. Smith, on the other hand, pleaded guilty to 67 counts of arson and only received a 15-year prison sentence. He will be released on the day before Halloween in 2023. According to author Monica Hess, who wrote a book about the bizarre crime spree, Smith is finally no longer in love with Bundick after waiting years for her to return to him. Number 8. Craig Thomas. In what a judge later described as the worst domestic abuse he had ever seen, a Welsh woman named Charlotte Rooks was put through unimaginable horror by her ex-boyfriend, Craig Thomas. Back in 2013, Thomas was sentenced to 10 years in prison for beating Rooks with hammers, stabbing her, forcing her to sleep naked and standing up, making her eat photographs and jewelry of her deceased loved ones, and inflicting other torture on her. According to a police inquiry, law enforcement visited the former couple's flat repeatedly, while Rooks was trapped. South Wales officers allegedly failed to grasp the severity of the situation, and the agency later issued a formal apology to the young woman. But it didn't exactly heal the physical and emotional scars that Rooks is still healing from to this day. Thomas was released in 2019 after serving half his sentence, but was quickly sent back to prison for violating his parole. He was freed again in 2023 after serving his full sentence, and he's banned from setting foot in the city of Cardiff, where Rooks currently lives. Prior to being released a second time, he sought to suppress the news by taking certain legal measures, but the court rejected his request for a gag order. Rooks remains fearful that Thomas will disobey the rules that have been put forth to protect her. She told the Daily Mail that she feels she is in danger given her ex's history of breaching the terms of his release. Even more troubling, she was not told where Thomas was living when she was informed of his release. For now, she's hoping to continue running a non-profit that takes care of pets for survivors fleeing abusive relationships. But it's understandably difficult to do at a time when she's sleeping with one eye open and constantly looking over her shoulder. Number 7. The Cookie Monster Killer. In September 2020, a 43-year-old Australian woman named Rebecca Payne fatally poisoned her husband, 68-year-old Noel Payne, with cookies that were laced with a heavy dose of sleeping medication. She then duct-taped Noel's body in a blanket and stuffed him into a freezer, most likely while he was still alive. Rebecca then went on a spending spree with her deceased husband's credit card. When people noticed that Noel was missing, Rebecca claimed that he had abandoned the home, but her story failed to hold up, and his body was discovered shortly thereafter. What Rebecca did was unacceptable under the standards of any civilized society. But there are two sides to every story, and her attorney argued in court that she was the victim of horrific abuse at the hands of Noel. According to Rebecca's lawyer, the couple split up in 2012 and reconciled the following year, but Noel refused to break up with a woman he had started seeing during the breakup. In fact, the other woman continued to live with the Paynes right up until the night of Noel's death. Rebecca was convicted of murder, despite her claims that Noel abused her. She was sentenced to 16 years in prison with the requirement that she serve at least 10 years behind bars before becoming eligible for parole. Number 6. Aaron Uchitel. A young mother from Atlanta, Georgia named Prosper Ortega endured days of unimaginable hell in 2016 when she was held captive and tortured at the hands of her husband, Aaron Uchitel. The 23-year-old had given birth just 2 weeks earlier when Uchitel struck her in the face repeatedly, hitting her so hard that he broke the orbital bone around one of her eyes. Uchitel also seriously injured his wife's legs. Prosper's mother, Fawn, discovered the horrific situation when she became worried after not hearing from her daughter and went to check on the young woman. Fawn later told the press that she had recently begun suspecting Uchitel of isolating her daughter. When Uchitel refused to let her into the house, she fought her way in. The moment she saw Prosper's face, Fawn called the police. By then, Prosper's injuries were so severe that she couldn't open her eyes. She was rushed to a nearby hospital, where she underwent surgery and was reunited with her baby. Uchitel admitted to hitting Ortega a couple of times, according to police, but the evidence spoke for itself, and he was arrested and held without bond. Meanwhile, Prosper began her lengthy road to recovery, which included multiple operations over the following 2 years. Uchitel ultimately pleaded guilty to 4 counts of aggravated battery, 2 counts of aggravated assault, 1 count of false imprisonment, and 1 count of influencing a witness. He's in prison and will reportedly remain behind bars for many years. Number 5. Craig Lester Thrift. 23-year-old Terry Eugene Rouse disappeared after attending a party in Waycross, Georgia in 1991. His car was later found abandoned in a swamp with the engine running, the radio on and the windows rolled down. Some of his personal belongings were left inside the vehicle. At first, police assumed that Terry had skipped town due to his mounting drug and debt problems, but they began to rethink their theory after learning that Terry had had an affair with Rhonda Thrift, the wife of his first cousin and best friend, Craig Lester Thrift. Rhonda and Craig divorced after Terry's disappearance. The case remained a mystery for the next 2 decades. At some point, it became clear that Terry was probably never going to return home. He was presumed dead, and the case was closed due to a lack of evidence. Investigators investigators had lingering suspicions of foul play, and the case was eventually reopened. In 2012, they narrowed their sights on Thrift, who not only gave Terry a ride to work on the day he went missing, but also refused to take a lie detector test years earlier. And while Terry's remains were never recovered, authorities decided they had enough evidence to finally move forward with a murder charge against Craig. At the time of his arrest, Craig was married to his second wife, Robin Barry. Robin later told the ID Channel series Evil Lives Here that her marriage to Craig began peacefully enough, but became increasingly abusive over time. She claimed that Craig repeatedly mentioned killing Terry and dumping his body in the swamp. And while Robin initially brushed off Craig's claims, she eventually began to realize that her husband was 100% serious. But for a while, she was afraid to speak up because Craig allegedly threatened to kill her if she said anything. When it came down to it, however, she was willing to testify against Craig, who was convicted in 2014 of killing Terry and sentenced to 7 years to life in prison. According to records, he remains behind bars for the time being. Number 4. Lara Page Conley. One unfortunate family from Independence, Kentucky learned the hard way that not all domestic violence situations occur between intimate partners. Growing up, Lara Page Conley always seemed to have an unusually high need for attention and a disrespect for the rules. And she never outgrew these traits, according to her older sister, Ginger Goetz, who told the ID Channel series Evil Lives Here that Page only became more volatile and demanding with age. In Ginger's words, something was just rotten inside. Instead of pursuing a career and moving out on her own, Paige lived with her mother, Carlene, well into her adulthood. She was verbally abusive toward Carlene, who told Ginger that she felt obligated to take care of Paige, and the abuse allegedly turned physical at some point. Tensions reached a boiling point in 2015 when Paige became enraged over her mother's choice of food to cook for a birthday dinner. What began as a verbal argument escalated to violence, and at some point Paige grabbed a knife from a butcher block and began stabbing Carlene. She plunged the blade into her mother dozens of times until Carlene went limp and died. Paige told the police a number of different stories, all of which made little to no sense considering the circumstances at hand. She even tried to accuse Carlene of attacking her first, even though Paige's mother had no history of being violent toward her children. Needless to say, a jury found Paige guilty of murder. She was sentenced to 27 years in prison and will be 66 years old when she is freed. Ginger made her feelings clear during Paige's sentencing hearing when she described her sister as ugly and sick to the marrow of her bones. Number 3. David Schaefer. In January 2018, first responders in Salem, Ohio, were called to the home of a retired law enforcement officer named Delbert Schaefer by his live-in son, David, who claimed that he had found his father unresponsive. The senior citizen's death initially appeared to be natural, but a medical examiner concluded that he had been bludgeoned to death. Delbert was a man of the law, but David was a different story. In fact, at the time, David was on parole for burglary and theft-related charges. He had a violent past, so police were quick to suspect him of being the killer. Based on the evidence, investigators theorized that David attacked Delbert and left him to die instead of calling for help. David even allegedly tried to clean the crime scene before dialing 911. When questioned about why he didn't immediately call for help, David allegedly told police that he initially called a friend who was a nurse. He claimed that the friend came over and checked on Delbert with a stethoscope, yet he couldn't remember the friend's name. Detectives soon discovered that David had recently stolen his father's entire gun collection, which only added to their growing suspicions. David claimed that he had given the guns away, but most of them were found hidden in a secret room that was blocked off by a table and a stack of books. Authorities charged Davis with murder, tampering with evidence, and a weapon-related count. During an interview with the ID Channel series Evil Lives Here, David's stepmother, Deborah Williamson, said that her stepson's behavioral problems dated back to childhood. She described David as manipulative and defiant and claimed that he had threatened her in the past. David ultimately pleaded guilty to a reduced first-degree manslaughter charge in exchange for a 14-year prison sentence. During his sentencing hearing, he said that he loved his father, that he wasn't a violent person, and that he misses Delbert every day. He claimed that Delbert's death was a tragic accident, but prosecutors saw it differently, describing him as a violent ex-con who ungratefully beat his father to death after being taken in when he had nowhere else to go. Number 2. Jesse Winnock. One night in 2007, 22-year-old Amy Chesler became concerned because she couldn't reach her mother, Hadis Winnock, during her drive home from work. The recent college graduate only became more worried when she called her brother, 25-year-old Jesse Winnock, who told her not to come home. Jesse hung up, so Amy kept calling until he picked up the phone again. When she asked her brother what was going on, Jesse said he had killed their mother. Shocked and sickened by what she had just heard, Amy dialed 911 and reported the situation as she rushed home. The dispatcher warned her not to go inside, in case the killer was still in the house, but she was so desperate to get to her mother that she didn't listen. Amy entered the house to find Hadis laying motionless and face down in a pool of blood with a knife sticking out of her shoulder. Amy would later reveal that Jesse abused her and their mother for at least 10 years leading up to the murder. He killed Hadis with a kitchen knife simply because she asked him to clean up after himself after he made himself a sandwich. Despite admitting to his crime shortly afterward, Jesse fought the charges against him for murdering his mother. It took for years for prosecutors to secure a conviction, and he received a sentence of just 15 years to life. According to a Change.org petition to keep Jesse in prison past the 15 years, his violent tendencies have only worsened since his incarceration began. In fact, at his parole hearing, he allegedly threatened to kill all his surviving family members. Thankfully, the parole board decided not to free him. He was subsequently convicted of a handful of new charges for crimes he's committed in prison, and his sentence was lengthened significantly. Number 1. Gene Keidel. 58-year-old Lyle Eugene Keidel and his wife Diane had a tumultuous marriage. They even separated at one point, but they made a renewed effort to save their relationship, presumably for the sake of their children. One evening in 1966, the couple left their 4 kids at their home in Phoenix and went out. The next morning, the kids woke up to find their father asleep on the couch, but their mother was nowhere to be found. Keidel filed a missing persons report but didn't seem overly concerned about Diane's absence. A few months later, the Keidels' home burned down, killing 2 family members and severely injuring another. Authorities ruled the fire as suspicious but declined to file any criminal charges. In 1993, nearly 30 years later, Jean and Diane's grown daughter, Lori Romanek, wrote a shocking letter to the police claiming that she saw her father striking her mother on the head on the night Diane went missing. Lori also remembered seeing Jean digging a hole in the backyard later that night, while her mother lay crumpled and motionless on the ground. Jean forbade the kids from playing in the yard for several months and later covered it over with concrete. After receiving Lori's letter, police dug up the yard and found Diane's skeleton and some of her clothing. Finally, almost 3 decades after Diane went missing, the mystery was solved. Gene Keidel was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, bringing this horrific chapter of his family's lives to a long-awaited end. He maintained his innocence from behind bars until his death in 2004 at the age of 68 years old. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be locked in a closet for a week or have all your fingernails ripped off? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.